What if I told you that style isn't just the look of art, but its heart, the force that shapes our entire experience of a painting, a book, or a film? When Susan Sontag published On Style, she shocked the art and literary worlds. As an incisive cultural critic, Sontag held that style isn't mere decoration, it's the backbone of what makes art meaningful. The mode of expression is just as important as the message itself. And while some critics argued that style could divert attention from meaning, Sontag saw things differently. She suggested that style is the principle by which a work is given form. And to understand her perspective, we should turn attention to what she means by style and how she argues it shapes our experience of art. When we hear the word style, many of us think about personal flair or fashion, but Sontag had something bigger in mind. She used style to refer to the unique qualities that gave a piece of art its shape. For example, think of how Kafka's strange, unsettling descriptions or Picasso's fragmented images create a specific mood. Sontag suggested these choices aren't just for show, they're essential to how we interpret the work. In other words, style isn't separate from content, it's part of it. To speak of style is one way of speaking about the totality of a work of art. Art critics traditionally saw style and content as separate. Style was how an artist said something, and content was what they said. Sontag challenged this idea, saying it creates a false division. She suggested that in any strong work of art, these two elements are tied together and impossible to split. If one were to define style as the manner of our appearing, this by no means necessarily entails an opposition between a style that one assumes and one's true being. In fact, such a disjunction is extremely rare. In almost every case, our manner of appearing is our manner of being. The mask is the face. Focusing on style helps us see what's right in front of us rather than trying to decode the art for hidden meanings. And against interpretation, Sontag argued that the act of decoding took away from experiencing the piece as it is. Take Picasso's Guernica, for example. It was originally painted in reaction to the horrific bombing of the Spanish town of Guernica in the Spanish Civil War, and the work expresses the agony of war in a crude, shattered manner. Picasso's choice of cubist forms and distorted figures perfectly matches the content of suffering and chaos. Each character, from the screaming mother to the trampled horse, is fractured and raw, intensifying the sense of violence. And the jagged lines and colorless tones convey pain and chaos more effectively than a more realistic style could have. Here, style and substance are not only intertwined, they reinforce one another. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a giant insect. Kafka's The Metamorphosis works similarly. The tale of Gregor Samsa waking up as a giant bug might be as much of a horror story as a family saga, but Kafka's detached, almost clinical narrative style gives the surreal content a haunting quality. Gregor's bizarre situation feels disturbingly mundane because Kafka's language remains straightforward and emotionless, even as his protagonist faces dehumanization and isolation. And this style draws readers deeper into the absurdity of Gregor's transformation and makes us feel the alienation that Kafka aimed to convey. And as Sontag would argue, Kafka's style isn't a separate flourish, it's integral to the story's power. Of works like The Metamorphosis, she wrote that they are secreted, not constructed. To Sontag, style reflects an artist's values, or what she calls an ethics of form. This doesn't mean art has to preach or moralize. Every choice an artist makes, be it in color, tone, or shape, reveals something about their vision of the world. Consider filmmakers like Jean-Luc Godard, whose edgy narratives prod us to think differently. Sontag insisted that choosing an original style is itself an ethical act. It's a way of saying, this is how I see the world. Style is the principle of decision in a work of art, the signature of the artist's will. Sontag saw style as more than an artistic decision. It was a way of knowing and experiencing the world. She argued that the way art is presented affects how we understand its message. Imagine looking at a surreal painting. The artist's dreamlike, distorted style might depict a different reality, but it also gives us a sense of what that world feels like. And for Sontag, this experience of style helps us grasp something beyond facts. As she wrote, art is not only about something, it is something. And And people often rush to interpret art, trying to translate its real meaning, but Sontag warned that this approach can strip away the enjoyment and immediacy of art. She argued that art should be experienced as a whole, not taken apart like a puzzle, and Sontag called interpretation the revenge of the intellect upon art in Against Interpretation. She argued it as a way to take control of something that's meant to be felt, not dissected. She instead urged readers to let art work on them without overthinking. Sontag admired artists with distinct styles because for her, individual style stood against the monotony of mass culture. In an age of cookie-cutter movies and songs, unique style becomes a way to resist. And originality can be a statement, a refusal to conform to trends or expectations. And when an artist commits to a particular style, they choose to stand out, and sometimes even make people uncomfortable. This act for Sontag showed the power of style to disrupt and provoke thought. Sontag's ideas on style reflect the influence of modernist artists who experimented boldly with form. She admired filmmakers like Michelangelo Antonioni, whose unusual pacing and quiet scenes drew viewers in through style alone, not plot twists. Sontag argued that by focusing on form, these artists invite us to slow down and pay attention, and their work goes beyond telling a story to let us feel its texture and mood. Sontag's appreciation for modernism shows in her call for audiences to experience art directly without rushing to judge or label it. While many praised on style, some critics found her views limited. Marxist critics challenged Sontag's focus on style as potentially isolating art from social realities. For example, art historian T.J. Clark contended that prioritizing form over content risks depoliticizing art. And Clark argued, style, when separated from the work's subject matter, often suppresses the socio-political dynamics underlying the artistic choices. Marxist scholars also argued that by focusing solely on style, Sontag's approach overlooks how art can reveal the power structures embedded in society. They contend that art should highlight injustices and challenge social inequalities beyond offering aesthetic experiences. And some critics expressed that her dismissal of interpretation made it hard to engage critically with art's relationship to the real world. Despite these critiques, Sontag's essay remains a seminal work for insisting on style as essential to understanding art beyond its explicit content. And even now, decades later, Sontag's thoughts reshape art and criticism. Her essay urged subsequent generations to consider art as an experience rather than something to be dismantled and explicated. And through the emphasis on style, Sontag merely gave critics permission to appreciate the how as much as the what. Style is not merely an extra or an accessory. It's a vital part of how art speaks to us. When we cease seeing style and content as separate, we begin to appreciate art in its full original form. Then we cease to differentiate between style and content and start valuing art for what it is. Style, after all, doesn't transform our approach to art. It actually transforms the way we see the world. If you enjoy this video, you know the drill. Like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world. And this could be a good one to watch next.